Hey guys, welcome back. It is your favorite Gimp with the Limp, and I am here with a special treat that I know many of you are going to be oh so excited to see finally on the table. This is one that I have been working at for a while behind the scenes, and of course, if you don't recognize it by looking at this very large map here, this is 1985 Under an Iron Sky by Thin Red Line Games. Oh, and before we even get started, let me just say the box is excellent. Let me pan out so you guys can see it. The box is massive because there's just hella components in this game, but it's very nice, very heavy, thick, sturdy. I like the cover of the game too. This little, dark, brooding look that it has for World War III. This getting ready to start. Really nice box. It doesn't fit necessarily with all the other war games that are more similar in box size, but I'll take that sacrifice to have a really cool box any day. Now, I've been trying to decide, like, how do I even begin? How do I even start to cover this? This game is massive, okay? I have one map for one scenario out in front of you, and you guys can see we're filling the screen, and I'm not even showing you all of it, okay? So let me pan out just a little bit, let you guys see how big this is. This is literally just one scenario. This is scenario 2 that I have set up to show to you guys. And I think this is going to shine. I set up a smaller scenario just because I can't set up the bigger one. I just don't have the space right now. I've got other things taking up my bigger tables, and I don't have the time for it. And it's not that I wouldn't dedicate the time. I don't want you guys to think that. But this game it's an experience, okay? It is very, very massive, very in-depth, very along in like a simulation more than a game, really. But yeah, I've been trying to figure out, how am I going to cover this? So I'm going to do it just like I do the others, and I'm going to do it to the best of my abilities. I'm going to let you guys know right off the bat. I'm going to make an error here or there along with this. I will do my utmost. That's why it's taken me so long to get this to the table, because I've read through the rule book. I've read through it again. I've gone over components. I've gone back, read something again, trying to get it. And it's not that the game is overly complex. I don't want you guys to think that. It's not needlessly complex, but it is complex. There's a lot of small parts that in and of themselves, like, okay, it's easy to understand this section, okay? And sorry again for the shadows, but I've got a lot of area to cover here, so you're going to have a little shadow. There's no way for me to get rid of all of it. But you're going to have a lot of small sections of the game that you'll read about, and you'll get the understanding, okay, well, I've got this little part, say movement or whatever, but that part's going to interact with this part. And then that part's going to interact with this part, and then this part, and this part, and this part. So it's a lot of small sections that in and of themselves aren't necessarily overly complex, but the fact that all these little sections interact with each other over the entirety of the game is what really gives this game its flavor and its shine. What I'm describing to you guys is either going to be a tremendous turn on or a tremendous turn off. All right, it's going to be up to you. I can't tell you whether or not this game is for you. You're just going to have to watch to kind of see how it plays and see if you're really wanting something that is this complex. But if you're wanting a deep World War III game, I would be hard pressed to find one that delivers better than this. Okay, so first, let's just eyeball the components real quick, give an overview. This first video, again, I'm just going to go over the basics of the game. We're going to look at the components. We're going to look through the sequence of play, kind of explain everything down, and then we're going to pick up on the next videos and play through it. Now, this first scenario, 5 turns, and I don't even know if I'll be able to get through all 5 turns. There's a lot happening back and forth, and I'm not even including all the special rules that can get involved, let alone the campaign. The campaign has 5 freaking maps on it. Now, 3 of them are this size, okay? This size, this huge map right here in front of you. 3 of these linked together, all covered with units, all duking it out. Helicopters and jets and tanks and mechanized and infantry. Just, really cool shit, right? Just love it. But it's massive. Now, there are 2 smaller ones that are like little addendums that kind of nudge up smaller, like notebook paper size maps that cover, like, I think a little bit of Poland or Norway, or forget exactly where one of them is, and then one's down over by Czechoslovakia, I do believe, that extends it out to show out the rest of the map. But this one, we're worrying about the central portion. I would say the main portion of the map. We're going to have West Germany and then East Germany over here, and of course our NATO forces fighting the Soviet forces. Now the only forces we're going to have to worry about are the Eastern German, Western German, Soviet, and U.S. forces fighting each other. But in the other scenarios, they do have plenty of the other Warsaw Pact units getting involved, and then the NATO units as well, like UK gets involved, all this other good stuff. You can actually see some of their symbols here on the map. Now, you guys are going to see the units as we get down into them, but just so you understand what these are delineating the section of the map that we're playing on, because we're actually not playing on this entire map. It is everything in between these. So this will stretch here, and then it curves down over here to these. That is the section that we're playing in. So not even the entire map, just this area here. So like I said, we got multiple maps. I've actually got one up here folded over just for the game turn track. And there's a movement point and modifiers track up here at the very top. But we're not going to be using that. I'm just going to use some dice to kind of keep track of stuff like that, so I don't have to reach way up there. And we'll just keep track of our game turns over there. Now, the maps themselves are made of a nice poster-like material. They are glossy, a little slick, okay, but actually very nice. They're not reflecting my light back at me too badly like some of these actually can do, so I like that. Thick enough not to overly worry about that you're going to tear it. So it's not like paper thin, but it's thicker than poster material, but a little bit thinner than like cardstock. So if that gives you an idea of that. The player aids are cardstock, nice and thick, nothing to worry about there. Pretty much your standard war game fare. So you've got a handful of player aids that we'll touch on here in a minute. The maps that come with the game, the rule books, which we'll show you as well. And then these player aids are like extra little rule booklets, and it has a whole bunch of stuff in it, like the terrain effects chart, and a bunch of different modifiers and everything else that's going to get involved into this game. I do like how they put this in a booklet, but the one thing that is not in this booklet that should be there is the sequence of play. For some damn reason, that's only in the rule book. That's a nickel. I would have liked to have had that somewhere besides the rule book, but you're going to be referencing the rule book a lot. I think even if you knew this game, you're still going to reference the rule book a lot. So those are the base components. The other part is the counters themselves. So let me pick up an easy one here. We'll grab this one. This is some air defense forces. So you guys can see these are the white core type counters. Not overly thick, but for the amount that you're getting in here, it's some odd 1,000 counters. I can't remember off the top of my head, but there's a lot. They work perfectly fine for purpose. They're the smaller half-inch counters. See if I can get that to focus. And you guys can see there is a lot of information, like unit size there at the top, designation on the left, deployment zone or hex, depending. There on the right, so this is C for central map, 1023, which is the hex that it was on. And then it's stats down there at the bottom, which we'll get into when we get into gameplay. And of course, the NATO symbol for what the unit type is. So fairly in line with your war game fare when it comes to the counters, especially when you have a lot of them. The more counters you got in the game, the less likely it is that you're going to be able to have the thickest quarter rounded or pre-rounded type counters, because that gets prohibitively expensive, not to mention the amount of space it's going to take in the box and then storage afterwards. So I get that. My only fault on the counters has to be the fact that they are the type, and I'll put a picture on screen because I actually took a picture before I went ahead and pulled them all out, that they have to be clipped. Okay. I mean, you don't have to, but you're going to have frayed edges. And yes, I sat here and I clipped every one of these counters. Actually, no, it was Absolute Victory that you guys saw in a video of me clipping. So there isn't a video of me clipping these counters. But yeah, you're going to have to do it. If not, you will get a lot of frayed edges with these, because as you can see on the picture, they have to be torn away from each other. Just the way that they are in the counter sheets. They hold in there better. They're less likely to pop loose, but it does make it a little bit harder when you have to separate them, and they do get those frayed corners that just look so awful to me. So yeah, if you're somebody who wants those nice, pristine looking counters like these are here, because I clip awesome and I have the Oregon laminate corner rounder, which they don't sponsor me, just letting you know. I like it. I think it works great. Definitely recommend, but I know some of you guys are, finger clippers or bust. Yeah, I'm getting goofy in my old age. All right, and the only other problem I could give to the counters has to do with what you can see on screen right now. So let's look at this. You can tell very easily where the Soviets are and where the other German units are, right? Yeah. Okay. And you can tell here where the Western German units are, but the American units do kind of bleed into the map a little bit. That is a problem. So look at this forest here. You can see that the forest is very, very close in color to the American shade. I would have liked to have seen them do a different color for the American units, even if they had to just go like with a bright blue or something besides the green. I get why America gets green. It gets green all the time. But when you match it to the map, it's just annoying, right? Because look, the farther I pull out, the more you can see that those units kind of bleed in. And especially with something like this, with small counters, small writing on the counters, and you're going to have to be getting in there, it makes it more likely for you to miss units when you're playing the game. So that's a small problem. I'll give it to it that it's not game breaking or anything like that, and it's not going to affect gameplay. It's just one of those quality of life type things that a different decision there would have made things just a touch better. All right, so this is our deployment for this part of the scenario. And over here, these long player aids that I have set out, let me tip the camera down so you guys can see this. These are the airports, all right? These are the air stations that are in the map that we have in play. So you guys see that they're all numbered, 101, 102, 103, all the way down. I actually got the higher level one here on the top for some reason. But these aircraft are located at these. So let's see if we can find one as an example. Okay, right here, 185. All right, so that's your number. And we see that at 185, that is Zweibrücken? Yeah, Zweibrücken. And it has this aircraft located at it, and it's this nationality. Okay, so you guys can see the nationality, what aircraft are there, whether they're ready or not ready. And then it's going to be like that for both. So these aircraft can be, or these airports can be taken out. All right. So if enemy units come in and they take out the air station, these units have to move or they get destroyed. And it's the same way with the Soviet forces. You see, they've got plenty of aircraft of their own. And this is how you're going to keep track. Now, these are your jets. Okay. Your jets and your bombers. I think some heavier level transport aircraft and recon type aircraft as well, located up here. We do have one that's off map, a NATO air electronics warfare, I believe is what that is, unit. This is off map somewhere, but it's able to be brought in. This is how you're going to keep track of all your different aircraft when they're out here, with the exception of your helicopters. Those are going to be actually kept on the map, and you can see, right, these are located at this airport, 111. So there's a couple of UH-1s there, but there's a helipad here that has a couple of helicopters on them as well. So your helicopters do operate differently than your jet fighter type aircraft. Your helicopters are going to stay on the board, and they can fly out. Now, they do have to return from a mission. You don't just move them out, leave them hovering out there somewhere. They'll fly out, do whatever mission it is they have to do, fly back. They do have a limited range though, so if they fly out too far, they pretty much suicide, which is in the game. kind of funny too. They put in there, it's like kind of gamey that you could fly them farther than they have range to, but they don't want you kind of gaming the system. I'll have to check that rule over again. A lot of little specifics for this stuff. So that's how aircraft are going to work. Let's eyeball the sequence of play and kind of show you how it's going to play out. All right, so keep in mind, I'm giving you just like the briefest overview of the game right now. We're going to get into a lot of this much more specifically when we start playing, because we are going to play through a few turns, let you see how these units move forward and do all their cool stuff, all right? So here's our sequence play. This is the part that I'm probably going to scan and turn into a player aid because I don't want to have to hold the rulebook the whole time. All right, so we're going to use this sequence, Mobilization Phase, and this is during like campaign games, right? So number one there is in the scenario booklet a set of scenarios that you can play that are smaller. They don't use all the maps. As you can see here, we're just using the central map. But if you're doing like a campaign game, then you don't start out at war, which is actually really cool. The Soviet player, the Warsaw Pact player rather, has the choice where they can kind of move units around and wait for a sec, or they can go ahead and declare a surprise attack and try to catch NATO with their pants down. So I really like how they included that in there, that you don't just automatically start at war. So think like the Eastern Front in World War II. Most of those games start with Blitzkrieg already happening, or it's the first turn of the game. You don't have time where you have German forces that you can move around and try to make your opponent guess where the real attack's going to come from. They actually do have that in the game, which is awesome. Number two, the Unrest and Revolt phase. This has to do with the fact that the Warsaw Pact allied countries, kind of like Poland, Czechoslovakia, and some others, they can revolt, okay? They can break away. There are rules for that in the game. That is one of the optional things. And actually, no, it's not optional, excuse me. In this scenario that I'm playing, those rules are actually not in effect. So we're not going to see that, but we'll touch on it a little more specifically later. Weather phase is pretty obvious. It's weather. External events phase. Now, this is whole flow chart that I'm going to grab and show you guys real quick. And it's on the back of the booklet player aid. And you guys can see there's a lot going on here. And this basically simulates the battle for the North Atlantic. All right, so there's stuff going on up there. And depending on what choices you make in game, like do you send resources, do you not send resources, what happens, that can have effects into your game, mainly in like reinforcements or modifiers later on down the line. But this is something that you do have to keep track of. So that's when all that's done. It kind of simulates stuff that happens off map that affects what's going on map. Okay, so going down from there, the external WMD release, there are weapons of mass destruction in this game. That is an optional rule. That's one that we're not going to use in scenario 2 here, but there is the ability for players to unlock chemical or nuclear weapons to use in the game. So yeah, you can nuke your enemy, which is awesome. And yeah, they even have rules for like different types of nuclear weapons too. Like you can do artillery or missile or, different types. Really cool how they got more than just a drop bomb. Number 6 there, we got SSM attacks, which is the chemical type attacks that Warsaw Pact can do. And then 7, air superiority phase. We need to kind of address that a little bit more specifically. One, look at this player aid here. Notice that there's a lot of boxes here where you can put units. And then when we look at the map, let me find a good example here. All right, there are, what they call those things, mega hexes, like super mega hexes, something to that effect, that count as your air superiority zone. So you can pick a zone that you're going to try to maintain air superiority with your forces. And then if you're both picking the same zone, then there's going to be an air battle, and whoever wins has superiority there. And that can give you modifiers when someone else, say you have superiority in this zone, then if the enemy comes into that zone, they have negative penalties if they're doing air missions since you have the superiority. Now, the Megazone are these white bordered hexes. So if you look very clearly here, you can see how this delineates what the mega hex is, okay? So you would pick this as one of yours, and maybe this or this, you know, wherever you want to gain control. And you probably want to put that to where you expect to be conducting your operations and where you expect your enemy to try to conduct their operations. So if you think they're going to try to bomb your units, you probably want to have air superiority over it. If you want to try to bomb their units, same thing. Now, there are modifiers that do get involved. That's what these white numbers are here. So you can tell where the center of a mega hex is by the white number. So we got one here, and there's one here, and so on all across the map. And the short version is you're going to do this in secret. Both people are going to pick what hexes they want. Then they're going to place whatever units they want from their available air power into those. And then any hexes that overlap, that's when the little conflict's going to go on. And we've got a little tracker here for air superiority combat. And then this is other air interception combat that comes into effect later on. All right, so now you guys can already see how this is going to take a little bit of time, especially when you're trying to play it solitaire and you don't have someone else making decisions for you. So air superiority phase, I just highlighted that. We'll get into it more specific. Nuclear strike, all right, bombs drop, people go boom, radioactive crap happens. Warsaw Pact action phase. This is effectively your main game section, okay? So this is where you're going to move, you're going to get reinforcements, replacements, special forces can happen, all that type stuff. You're moving your units, and then obviously after the Warsaw Pact goes, that's when the NATO guys are going to do their stuff at the same, or after. It's always going to go Warsaw and then NATO conducting their actions. Now, we're not going to worry about special forces in this. Again, that's another special rule or optional rule. They do have rules like that. They have rules like airborne drops. I mean, it really, really gets in depth, and I'm struggling on this one, so I want to show you guys like the highlights. I want to hit the basics of how the game plays at its core, and then we'll just touch on some of these extras that can be done. Now, something I wanted to mention before we cut this video, and we'll pick up with the start of the first, Soviet turn and all the other good stuff in the next one, is the interesting movement in this game. And if you notice here at the top, it says things like road mode and tactical mode, and there's also something called hedgehog mode, which certain units can't go into. But basically, there's multiple types of movement in this game, and you see on the terrain effects chart that it lists down different modifiers depending on what type of movement you're in. But that's going to matter as well when you're conducting your operations. So effectively, you don't want to be caught in road mode by your enemy, and they're in tactical, so they'll be able to beat you up really well because your guys aren't prepared for a fight. They're marching 2x2 up the road or driving 2x2 because there's not a whole lot of infantry action in this game. It's all mechanized, but you guys get my point. You're not prepared for combat. So that's how in depth this goes, but it's a little more in depth than that because you have options when it comes to movement. Now, I know you think one of these numbers on these units has to do with movement, but with helicopters it does, but with your ground units, it doesn't. Each ground unit, for the most part, there are a few exceptions, for the most part, so each ground unit's going to have 20 movement points that they can spend. Now, yes, there are things that will affect it, but you'll spend your 20 movement points and move along, go along roads and through trees and, avoid prohibitive terrain, all that good stuff like normal, but it doesn't have to stop at 20. There's something called fatigue that your units can get. So effectively, you can stress your units or potentially stress your units because it's not a guarantee. The lower the level of the fatigue, the less you go over 20, the less of a chance it is that it's going to cause your units to get fatigued. But you can do that. If you need to get that extra attack in, or you need to get the few hexes farther so you can get in that right position, you can do that. You can fatigue your units. You can spend over that 20 movement point allowance, but then you do have to roll, and that's when you can get into potentially fatiguing your units which does cost a penalty, for modifiers for them. Or you can push them so hard that they even take step losses. So I love how they have that in the game, that you're not just limited to the amount of movement points that you got and you just got to make it work. The choice is up to you. Do you want to go a little bit harder? Do you want to go in road mode so you can try to get farther? And then if you go in road mode, I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it's 40 or 50. It's 40 or 50 is the maximum amount of movement points you can spend, like, period, in a turn, but then you're going to be getting really, really fatigued. But do you want to do that? You have the option to actually make those choices. Now, there are exceptions, like if you move into an enemy zone of control, you got to stop, you got to make attacks into whoever's got zone of control over that area. But generally speaking, you can make a lot of choices when it comes to what movements you're going to make with your forces. But that means your enemy's going to have those types of choices as well. So when you're looking at it, you can't just think to yourself, okay, well, these Soviets over here have 20 movement points, so I know they can only get to here. So if I stay back here, I can just shell them from a distance or hit them with my helicopters and they can't get to me in the next turn. Well, yeah, they can. They can stress. They can take a little fatigue and get right up on top of you and get that attack going when you're not prepared for it. And they might catch you out in a bad position when your guys aren't prepared for the attack. So yeah, I am definitely excited to give this monster a try, because this is a monster. This is absolutely freaking monster. I mean, it's a beautiful monster, but it's a monster. I'm absolutely looking forward to giving this one a go. It's going to take me a little bit. You guys bear with me, because we're going to run through it slow. I don't care how long the turn takes me, as long as I can do it as well as possible. Like I said, I know I'm going to have an error here or there. The game's just too complex for me not to forget something along the way, but I want to show it to you guys as well as possible. This game is the caviar of war games. Okay, I think this is one of those that if you play something like this, you can call yourself a war gamer, right? You can really call yourself a war gamer. This is when you're putting the effort. And I'm not saying the other stuff isn't war game, but this is just so in depth. It's a work of art. Almost. You can tell love was poured into this game, that they did research, that they tried to learn as much as they could about the unit size and strength and compositions and where they were and what they would potentially do and how all the different types of units interact with each other and how air power's going to interact with all the different types of combat going on. They really did their homework when it comes to this game. But because they did their homework, it means you have to do your homework when it comes to it as well. This is not a game you're going to sit down and play in an afternoon. It's not. I mean, you could play like the tiny little scenario 1 and get it. But if you get this game, say you got it today, it's going to be a couple days. You need to sit with that rule book. You need to go over it. You need to thumb through the components and kind of get your head around all the different rules. Try a couple of units, just moving them around on the board so you feel like you've got a good grasp of it before you really start trying to sink into this, because there's just so much going on here. All right, but yeah, I could talk about this for a while. I'm just yapping away on this. You guys stay tuned. We're going to pick up with the next one with the start of the sequence, and we're just going to walk through it slow. Just move the units, move the pieces, make sure I'm going through it as well as possible so I can show you guys this game to the best of my ability. Feel free to put your questions down below, and I will definitely try to answer those for you guys. Anyway, you guys take care. I will see you in the next one.